All right, so this is very interesting. So someone brings this into focus for you, and now they've opened up this new dimension of thought where you are understanding, okay, I have this like power, and I can use it to get myself out of prison. And did you start thinking about how else you could use it?
Oh, definitely.
So did you ever like think about, and because this is a question that comes up a lot for people, is how do you use your white privilege in the realm of anti-racism?
Well, I mean, at the time, we had to use it. I was living in a very white town. I was living in Oregon at the time, and we were living with people who we had a Black Panther Party and a Patriot Party, and we were all living together in the same house. And so we would have deep discussions. And that's what I said, like, there were things that I could go into that a Black person could not go into. There were questions that I could ask that a Black person was not able to ask. And we would have discussions about that. Okay, well, I know you can't get into here, so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to get you in. And, and now as I'm older in a totally different context, I still think that people say that they want to be an ally. I mean, I don't really consider myself an ally, but in what, yeah, but I am. But other people say so. That I think that you have to use, but their privilege. I think you have to use your privilege as a weapon instead of denying it. Use it as a weapon. And here's just a very personal example. I have a friend. He's an older Black man, and he uses me sometimes when he needs to collect. He to help be his bill collector. Because I mean, at one time, I remember he called me one day. He said, "Oh, I need your white voice." I go, "What's up?" Because he had this business. It was something to do with credit card machines, in those days before we were doing Venmo and everything like that. And these people wouldn't pay him. And they would talk down to him, I guess, because he was like older and he was Black. So I called him up and I said, "This is Mrs. I can't remember the name I used. I am from the National Credit Card Payment Protection Agency or something like that. And it's come to our attention that you have not paid this guy. And we don't want to have to send people over to your house." And he called me later. He said they showed up an hour later, he said, with in those days, a check in hand. So the I mean, and that's like in a personal way, but the other way that's really important, you're working for a company and they are looking and the manager who's white is looking to hire somebody. I mean, not hire somebody. He wants to give somebody a promotion. So the people that he's considering are people in his inner circle who all look like him. Now, you know that CEO and you have a really good relationship with him. But of course, he's not even seeing the people of color. He's definitely not seeing the Black people, so he's thinking, I'm looking at the top people, but it's like the Black people don't exist. I mean, that's just how it is. And so what you do if you really want to use your privilege in a powerful way is you start talking about this guy. You start talking about, well, what happened with me was a Black guy. You start talking about him, and then what you do then is you put his name out. Have you looked at so and so? And I remember he said, "No, I hadn't thought about it." In my mind, I'm going, "Yeah, of course you hadn't thought about it, because you're racist." But and Black people are just invisible. But but that's one way that people can do that in organizations. Look at who's not being considered, who's not being looked at, whose ideas are they always asking for. For instance, I do a lot of organizational assessments around because of my work in diversity. And when I first started doing assessments, I had heard from a lot of different people. They go, "Oh, my manager doesn't say hello to me." And in particular, it was people of color, but it was everybody. And so I said, "Well, that's interesting." And he said, "Well," and people said, "Well, I don't really feel welcome because they don't say hello to me." Now, at first, I didn't understand what the big deal was. So I started asking managers and I said, "Well, they said that you don't say hello to them." And every manager said, it was like 4 different managers said, "Oh, I say hello to everyone." So I said, "Okay, I want you to do a hello inventory. And what the hello inventory is, I want you to go through your day, just like, don't think about it, and see, who do you say hello to? And when you need to get feedback, who do you go to for feedback? All 4 of these managers came back and said to me, he said, you know what? You're right. I don't say hello to all these people, and I don't ask everybody for their feedback. And I asked them why. One person said, well, I don't know, I don't know them. One person was really honest, and he said, because I've never really been around a lot of non-white people, and I don't really know what to say. So I don't say anything. So their assignment then was to start saying hello to people. And it was very simple. And their next assignment was to look at who they asked for information or for ideas. And sure enough, of course, everybody asked people for ideas that look like them. And one person said, well, yeah, of course I do, because I need to get things done fast. I said, well, you can get things done fast, but it doesn't mean you're getting things done well. And if people don't feel like you're utilizing them, they're going to leave the company, and they'll either work for your competition or they'll become your competition. So those are just, it's important for people who really want to use their privilege to look at, instead of being embarrassed by, people say, oh, I'm so guilty, blah, blah, blah. I don't have time for that. I really don't. I do not have time for, I don't want to hear about all your guilt, blah, 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 blah. Because people use their guilt as a way of not doing anything. Oh, I'm too guilty to talk to a Black person. I'm too guilty to do anything. Okay, stay home and be quiet. But the reality is, instead of guilt, look at, how can I use what I have to get what we need? And it's not just white privilege. I mean, it could be any privilege. It could be economic privilege. It could be position privilege. Because everybody, like I tell people in my workshops, because a lot of people, when they hear the word privilege, especially like white people, get very freaked out. So I always say to them, look, everybody here has some kind of privilege. It could be a male privilege. It could be height privilege. It could be education privilege, whatever it is. So I want you to just be aware of that, because it gives you, it's an automatic advantage that you have. Don't be ashamed of it, because if you're ashamed of it, you can't help anybody. I said, but right now we have to look at which privilege or which inequity is the most glaring. Now, these others exist and we need to deal with them. I said, and I always say, and now right now, there's an issue of the privilege that white people have over people of color. I said, and then there's a hierarchy. So if I do it like that, people don't feel guilty. They say, oh, yeah. Okay, how can I use what I have to help people get what they need? I said, and then they, in turn, other people will help you. Maybe they're going to become a manager, and then they could help you because get something that you want. But unless people are willing to look at it, we can't move forward.
100%. Yeah. I mean, you said so many amazing things there. I'm so glad to hear that from you. And I just want to say, like, I mean, wow. You've given people a lot to think about, I feel, in that short time. You empowered people. You gave them a message of empowerment, right? You gave them a way to see themselves as having some kind of power to wield in a way that was positive. And like, I don't think a lot of people, racialized white people specifically, see themselves that way in the race context. So it's very valuable work you're doing there. Yeah, I'm writing a book about teaching, co-authoring it with an amazing professor. So yeah, look out for that in the future.
I will.
Anyways, let's talk a little bit more about your work that you're doing now and your own conversation podcast. So tell us about the podcast. Tell us what it is. Tell us, about your guests, and tell us about your reflections on it. Okay.
My podcast is called Everyday Conversations on Race for Everyday People. It's a conversation podcast. It's not an interview, but it's a conversation. And what I do is I have people on the show who, I never have like 2 white people on the show. So it's not going to be me and some other white person. Okay. You could be, there's a million white shows like that. But so what I do is I always have me and a person of color from somebody who's different than me. And if I have a white person, which is cool, then I also have a person of color, because it's a cross-race conversation on race. Because I want people who are listening to hear conversations that maybe they wouldn't necessarily have. You know, most people, and in particular, most white people, don't really know anybody who's different than them. They don't really have any friends that are Black or people of color. Although people will say, yeah, I'm really good friends with them. I go, well, how are you friends? Well, they work at the store where I always go. That's not a friend. Or I work next to them. Oh, have you been in each other's house? Well, no. Have you had a deep conversation? No. Or you could have a friend. You could be white. I mean, I can only speak for a white person. I don't speak for all white people. I can just speak for myself, white Jewish person. That you could have a friend, because people always say, well, you know, my best friend or my friend with blah, blah, blah. But have you had any conversations? Have you actually talked about race? Because people are so afraid to talk about race. You know, white people are afraid to talk about it. They're afraid, oh, I'm going to say the wrong thing, blah, blah. So I'll say nothing. And then people of color are afraid because they don't want to be trivialized or ignored. You know, they don't want to be told, oh, that's not important. Oh, why are you bringing this up? Okay, we're going to fire you for bringing it up. So that's why we have these conversations. And also because I have friends from every single background, because if not, life would be really boring. And because of my work, and I've facilitated dialogues across race for years. I mean, before I was even doing this work, like, you know, for like 40 years. And the last few years, people were calling me, hey, is this racist? Am I racist? Or do you think they were racist? And also, I was missing some of my friends. So I said, okay, I'm going to have this podcast. And I'm going to first, and I'm going to have people on the show talking about race. It'll be a cross race conversation, because also then I'll be able to like talk to my friends. I'm going to start it out with my friends, but then everybody said, oh, you got to talk to this person or that person. So I ended up having like people who were in the NFL on my show, journalists, musicians. So I've had the coolest people, some of the coolest people on my show. I mean, my friends are cool too, but I mean, other people too. And of course, I had you, my new friend, on the show. So my purpose really is bringing people together and for people to hear conversations that they wouldn't normally hear. So I've had people say to me, man, I never had a real conversation with a Black person before. That was so enlightening, because my show is very personal. It's like your show, you know, it's like it's a conversation like your show. And, you know, all the shows that I've heard of yours, you get people to really talk about themselves. And that's what I do. Like one of my shows, I had one friend of mine who was African-American, my friend Joel, and I had another friend who was Chinese-American, my friend Le Memoir. And we did a Chinese or an Asian Black conversation where Joel talked about the stereotypes he had heard growing up about Black people, about Chinese people, and about Asian people. And Memoir shared the story of what he had heard growing up about Black people. And the story was very profound. A Black man had actually killed his mother. And he went on to do work around race. He's actually a filmmaker. So Joel and Memoir had this very deep conversation. And afterwards, people called and said, I'd never heard that kind of conversation. I never heard, you know, I had Asian people say, never heard a conversation like that with a Black person. I had Black people say, I'd never heard that conversation before with an Asian person. I've been wanting to ask questions, but, you know, I was afraid, or the stereotypes and biases that people have until you get to know them. I mean, the same thing right now. If you look at what's going on, like between a lot of Jewish Palestinian animosity, and I'm not talking about what's happening in the Middle East. I'm talking about here in this country, that I've been part of Palestinian Jewish dialogue groups for like 40 years, even before. And what I see here, and a lot of that hate that I see, is people not knowing each other. And there's so many forces that come into play where people are afraid of each other, and they believe all the stereotypes that they hear. And that's how people get to hate each other. People can hate people and dehumanize people that they don't know, and when they haven't heard their story. And so my podcast is about having people share the story, no matter who they are, whether they're a senior. I had somebody who was a VP, a black man who was a executive VP, and we talked about what it was like for him to be an executive VP in this huge, 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 big mega company where he has a lot of power. And people are like almost like afraid they want to say the wrong thing, or they're like wanting to get to know whatever it is. But what happens when he's on the street and he's just a black man who can be stopped by the police at any time, or by and I got him on after there was like something that happened with a bunch of white kids who had like attacked a black man who was also a professional person. So we talked about that. We talked about another show I had somebody who was black, and he talked about he's involved in investing in helping in black wealth, but he talked about generational wealth and how the lack of generational wealth and generational information often put people of color at a disadvantage in terms of acquiring wealth. So and then I've had all different kinds of people. I have so many different kinds of people on my show from all over, from Cuba, from Puerto Rico, Africa. I had C20 on my show. He was a freedom fighter with Nelson Mandela in South Africa against apartheid. He went to prison. He was tortured. And after he got out, he got involved in the reconciliation movement. And he ended up forgiving his captor. And it wasn't that, oh, yeah, it was great. It's okay that you kidnapped and tortured me. No, he had to forgive him to let go for his own personal freedom. And he shares his story. And then I have people, because I'm a recovering drug addict for almost 40 years. I had people who I know who talked about race and addiction, race and mental health, race and incarceration.
That is just, you really, I mean, your experiences, this is so valuable that you're sharing with me. And I really appreciate you coming on and trusting me enough to like share this information. I know that like you would do it no matter what, like it's just like who you are, but like still, it means a lot that you would come here and say these things. So I just feel like I need to say that out loud so that you hear it. But the story is about a woman who attended one of these, and she was not a native to Israel, but she lived in Israel for several years. And she told a story about a young Palestinian boy, teenager, like 16 years old, who his car broke down and he was stuck on the wrong side of town, and curfew was fast approaching. There was a curfew, and if he was out, he could be killed pretty easily. And so she was actually kind of encouraged to shelter this kid by family members. And she didn't want to, she said. But she was encouraged to do so. They kind of shoved him in the house with her, and she was with him for a few hours. And she said that she was terrified, because of exactly what you said, the biases, the stereotypes that she had been programmed to believe about Palestinians. And she believed them about this 16-year-old boy who, was probably terrified out of his mind of her and the situation. But she was like, I decided after about an hour of kind of just like steering clear of him, basically, she said she asked him if he wanted some food, wanted to eat, and they ate a meal together and they shared food together. And she said after like an hour of sharing food, it was hard for them to communicate, but she was like, after an hour of like sharing food and like being around him, she's like, I realized that he was a human. And that's how she vocalized it. And that was like the whole story. Like that was the point of the story, is her realizing a human was a human. And it just really goes to show the power of these biases. People think we're overstating it, but the people who are affected they literally report that they can't recognize a human as a human. So like, I mean, what more do you want? You know, like what more do you want to see how powerful race and racial bias is, and gender bias can be just as powerful, and so can you know all of the isms. You know, so we just need to be cognizant of that. At some point, we need to accept that reality. At some point, we need to, you know, it needs to be accepted as like the way things are, because it is the way things are. We're not at that point yet, and it's going to be very difficult, I feel, to galvanize enough support for solutions. Forget about like coming to agree to solutions, just getting enough support to do anything at all, I think is going to be a fraught process until there's enough kind of like foundation that we all can agree that this is a huge problem that's greatly impacting many people in our society, all of us really, and we need to deal with it.
Well, I think what you said is really important on a couple of different levels. Because one, there's the fact that she was able to somehow, she went, well, the guy was in her house. She was able to get past some of her fear and have a conversation. And then she said, I realized that this guy was a human like me. And people who I think are extremely dogmatic, this is what they would say. They'd say, oh, so you just had to realize he was a human, like that was a big deal, blah, blah, blah. You know, and then they're going to like be critical of this woman and put her down and say, see, you're just a Islamophobic or anti-Arab. I don't know if he was Muslim or not. But on the other hand, for me, and I know for you too, we see that as something beautiful because we want people to be seen as humans. And we can't expect to say, oh, I know everybody's human, because there's human and there's human. There's human with the empathy, with thoughts, feelings, emotions, love, sadness, all of that. And when we realize that about people who maybe we knew nothing about or who we had biases against, that's a big deal, because then that person is going to go and tell somebody else. That person is going to, like, that person like shared her experience with you, and you're sharing it now. And that's what we have to do, because the reality is people, unless people know each other, when somebody is really different, people do see them as less than human. And if you look at what I hear oftentimes here, like between people who Palestinians and Jewish people here, it's because people are afraid of each other. They don't know each other and don't necessarily see each other as human until they do. And again, I'm not talking about what's going on over there, but we also do have a lot of people, a lot of racists in this country who are Islamophobic, anti-Semitic, because both of those are real, who will do anything they can to foment hate. And the only way that we could stop that hate is by having those conversations. In our Palestinian Jewish dialogue group, we used to say that an enemy is someone whose story you haven't heard yet. Because once you hear people's story, you can't really hate them. I mean, you see them as a person. You see that they love their families like you love your family. And of course, there's always going to be people who, no matter what proof you give them, no matter what, they're going to be like, I call them professional haters. And the only people who could help those people are people who are former professional haters. But the average, I call it the ignorati, we could move people to a different level. And I've had people who tell me they never met a Jewish person before. So I do what I can to see me as a human being. I mean,
there's so many like hearing you talk, there's like a million stories that come through my head that like actually rarely arise, to be honest. Like some of these I haven't thought about in a long time. You're really like getting the juices flowing, which is very interesting. That this is like a rare occurrence for me. So pretty cool.
A lot of white people have to hear from another white person. And that's just how it is. Yeah, okay, we wish it wasn't that way, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, oftentimes, white people listen to other people, listen to people who are like them. So they need to hear from another white person, and then and then they need to talk to people of color too. But it's like, gay rights, and gay marriage, or same-sex marriage came about when straight people got involved, because straight people would listen to other straight people. And it's the same with anything. Any of our struggles or taking down systemic racism, you have to have people who are involved in whose group helps create that system to be able to dismantle it.
So what do you say to the people who would say to you, like, because there is this faction out there in both racialized black people and racialized white people communities who believe that, like, oh, white people don't need to do anything, we have no obligation, or like people in the racialized black community who will be like, oh, like, you want white people? You need white people to exist? Oh, what are you? Like, so what do you say to both of those groups? Like, how would you explain to them why we need that intersectionality?
Well, sometimes you need somebody else who used to think that way to help them change. I mean, that's the reality. Because if somebody is going to go, well, I don't need to do anything. No, I'm against racism, but I don't need to do anything. Or I don't need to do anything because my ancestors didn't have slaves or whatever. So then, I mean, I always say, well, do you support the system now as it is? And you have to decide. And the same thing, I mean, I can't talk to a black person so that they don't need white people involved. It takes another black person to talk to them, really. But there's some people who they will come around, but we need to also, for me, I think I need to spend my time with people who are more likely to come around, because then I get them, and then they get other people who are more like them, and so on and so on and so on. Now, for me, the white people that I really like to talk to more than anybody, if you're looking at that in terms of talking to people about race, are people who really don't know, not people who think they know. I mean, there's enough people talking to people who think that they know, they're like the good white person, blah, blah. They want to put down other white people who say the wrong thing, or they want to jump on them. That's not me, but I actually have a much easier time talking to other white people who don't know, who don't know. So they don't have any, like, they might have some preconceived notions, they have stereotypes, they have biases, but they don't think they know it all. And those are the best people. And I could talk to them because I'm from a working class background, and a lot of times people are working class. You have to find for me, I have to find places that I can find commonality. And you know me a little bit now. I can talk to anybody, and I'm always going to find.
We're similar in that way, Simma. Like, we're very similar.
That's why I love it. That's why I love talking to you. When you were on my show, I didn't want to stop. And then about being on your show, I'm like, oh yeah, it's 2 hours. Hey.
It's a sacrifice. Like, for black people, for people of color, like, it's a sacrifice to engage in that communication because of exactly what you said. Like, it's not just fear. There is a material harm that comes from engaging in this, just the conversation itself, for people of color. Like, there is a risk of actual harm. And it can be nothing to, like, literally everything. So it's just, you have to be willing to put yourself in that space as a person of color. And so that's your crucible that you have to think about and deal with and, like, wrestle with and decide, are you down? Are you truly down with this? Because it's a sacrifice, and that's what it takes. And then for the racialized white people, right, on their side, they have to think about, okay, like, am I just going to walk zombie-like through this racial wasteland, and, or am I going to wake up and am I going to get involved? Am I going to use my power? Am I going to weaponize my privilege, as you said earlier? Am I going to actually fight against a system that has elevated me above others? Do I believe in justice? Do I believe in human equality? And am I willing to act on that belief and to live by that value? That's their crucible and question that they have to think about. So we all are under this hierarchy, and we all have things that we have to wrestle with. They're not necessarily the same things, but they're both extremely difficult problems and questions that we have to ask ourselves. But once you answer it, if your answer is true, you're done. The work is done. Now you just execute. If your answer is true, then you will then just start executing, and you start small, okay? And then you work your way to wherever you feel comfortable. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's everything right with that, actually. So that's what I think. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I mean, something that you said just really made me think about something. Um, it made me think about, like, okay, so if you're a Black person, and it could be any person of color, because I'm talking to you, because, okay, say you're a Black person, you are a Black person, and you want to have fun. You want to enjoy yourself. You want to do what other people do. You want to go to concerts. You don't want to have to worry. You want to hang out at night. You want to go to the beach. You want to do all these things. You want to just hang. But because of everything that's going on around race and racism, and because you believe you understand what's going on around you, and you don't want to be oblivious, you can't really be 100% with what you want to do. You know what I mean? You still have.
I mean, you can, but it's a risk. It's a huge risk.
But you can, but at the same time, if you feel like if you understand the system, and you feel like a responsibility to not just do stuff for yourself, but to help everybody else, because you understand the system, you're still spending time when maybe you see somebody else that can just live their life. Like one of my guests on my show, she was talking about the fact that she's Black, and she's a professional athlete family, and they have a lot of money. I mean, they really have they have a lot of money. They have enough money to do whatever they want. He had some white friends, and they were going out at night to hang out and drive around. But her son really wanted to do that. But as the only Black kid in that little group, and because her son had been stopped before, he couldn't do that. He didn't have that luxury. And she said it was really hard to have that conversation, the conversation, because she wanted him to be able to enjoy hanging out. But she knew that it would be dangerous for him. So I know it's like, you can't just hang, because there's other things. I mean, sometimes you can, but you can't all the time. Right?
I mean, it's, again, it's not like you can't. It's more like it's a huge risk if you do, right? Like, the mother was protecting her son. It's not that the son couldn't do it. He could have snuck out. He could have gone, right? Like, I mean, he could have done it.
Yeah, could have stopped by the cops and shot.
Exactly. But that's the point, right? It's a huge risk if you then do it. So it's not an absolute bar, but it is very close to that. And so a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people overlook that, and they don't think about the mentality that can develop when you're under constant threat. And when you're reminded that you're under constant threat all the time. People don't understand that kind of existence, like, because that's not the existence that a lot of people who aren't racialized Black, live. I'm sure the Palestinians know exactly what it's like. You just reminded me, actually, I know some other practitioners of the kind of work that you described. What was the guy's name again?
Gabor Mate.
Gabor Mate.
Yeah. I just love listening to this man talk. He breaks it down.
Yeah, so I believe it, and I'm definitely going to look him up. And there's other people.
And then my grandmother's hands too.
Yeah, I do need to get in on that. You're right, but I have met other practitioners as well. People who have found various methods of expelling racial trauma. I'm sure it'll get just like dismissed as a religion or a cult by people and stuff like that. But ultimately, rites of passage are a part of the human experience. And, cleansing yourself of trauma is a rite of passage. Like it's like something that transforms you as a person, to your core. And so I think that it's very hard for people who are not religious or who think that like you can logic your way through everything, is these
Yeah.
yeah, for those people, like this idea is like something that's so foreign and like not even within the scope of their imagination that those are the people often who have the most power as well, I find. And so somehow we need to change that. We need to change that the people in power are people who are somehow detached from the fact that, you know, people have different experiences and different universes of knowledge that you don't have access to. And the only way to get access is to communicate and to trust. And it's something that's like how we grow our collective knowledge base, like at a fundamental level. So, yeah, we got to do it. And despite all these racial barriers, despite the toxicity of our racial environment, despite, all the powers that be encouraging us to fight each other and to, step on each other and to divide ourselves from each other, we've got to fight that. And one way that I'm going to end up doing that is creating live events. Some of the live events I'm trying to create for the end of this year here is going to be some coffee shop events. And I'm going to use the Patreon dollars. I'm going to announce it here since we're here. Why not? I'm going to use the Patreon dollars, $300 at each coffee shop. And it's the tab. And anyone can get their coffee or their hot chocolate or their tea and their dessert. And it's on the Contraband Wagon as long as you participate in what I'm calling a race quiz. And this is an interactive virtual quiz that you can take with your cellular device. You scan a QR code, it'll be on your phone, so you can just like sit wherever you want, you can take it. And I'll be narrating the quiz. I'll tell you a little story and then I'll ask you a question about it. And you'll have to answer a question. And then I'll tell you the answer and I'll explain the answer and I'll explain why it's important and why I put the question in there. And then there'll be a leaderboard. And if you get the question right, you get some points. And after like a series of 10 questions, whoever is at the top of the leaderboard, we invite you to be on the live stream and, give you some kind of a gift card or something, So, yeah. What do you think?
Wow. I want to do one. Okay, you need to obviously come here, obviously.
Obviously.
So
I think
I
it's going
love
to be really
your
fun.
ideas are so amazing. They blow me away. I want to do that kind of stuff. I need help.
Yeah, I mean, I needed help too. Like, trust me, when I made that poem, when I wrote that poem, I was living in my mom's apartment. I had just moved from New York to North Carolina with my tail between my legs, going back home, like after 12 years of living in the Bronx, living in Manhattan, living in Brooklyn, teaching in middle schools and high schools, special programs, running a mentorship program, going to law school, all of this stuff. And I came back home and I was in my mom's spare bedroom in her apartment. And I wrote this poem over the course of a month, reflecting on what I wanted to do, and how I wanted to put myself out there. And there was a whole reason why I was going to tell this story. And now I totally forgot what it is. Can you remind me? What did you just say?
I was saying that I wanted to do those events too.
Yeah.
And I said, I need help.
That's right.
I said, I need people. You're listening to this and you want to help me on my show. Hey, I need you. Come on. But you were talking about how you needed help when you first came.
Yeah. Thank you so much for jogging my memory there. I did need help. I spent a month writing that poem as setting my intention. But my intention and the reality, obviously, as often is the case, right? You imagine something will happen, right? But then you like actually sit down and you're doing it and you're like, oh, like I actually have to pay a lot of money in order to do this. Like I have to pay for the meetup group. I have to pay for
Yeah.
yeah. There's just a whole litany of things that I had to pay for, and I needed better technology, so I had to buy that and invest in that. And so I had to do this over the course of time. You know, I invested a lot of money in this. I'm still well into the negatives, and all the money I get from my patrons, I'm using for the live events. You know, I'm not putting it, you know, and pocketing it. So,
We need
basically,
benefactors. We need
yes,
benefactors.
exactly. People have so much money out here. I don't know what these people do with their money. Like, I'm like, y'all just are just sitting with your money. Like, what? I know you have things that you care about, things that you want to support. I know there's a lot of people who care about anti-racism. Maybe they don't want to get directly involved themselves, but support people who are involved, you know? Support the people who are doing the work. I support people all the time. I'm supporting you.
I know. He's making a monthly donation. I'm so happy. But let me just tell you, for benefactors, you could have like me and Will Contraband. You could have us together if you really want to make a big donation, and we'll let you come for free.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, come on, guys. You got to
I'm
support.
down.
If you believe in stuff, I really, truly believe you got to support. You can support me
Yeah.
at my Patreon, www.patreon.com/the Contraband Wagon. Link will be posted in the chat. Thank you, Marigoth. And Simma, where can people support your work?
Well, I don't, but wait, no. But if you're listening to you, you should support his work. If you have money left over, you could support my work. Go to www.raceconvo, convo like conversation.com, and it's tax deductible. I'm actually has nonprofit status. Make a tax deductible donation to me, to my show.
Perfect. Excellent.
raceconvo.com. But also you can come and listen to some episodes, because my episode with Will is going to be up hopefully by Monday. I'm slow. I don't have the help that he has.
Yeah, so now I do have help. Luckily, I have the amazing moderator Marigoth who just posted the Patreon link in the chat. Thank you so much. Yeah, like it is a game changer. Definitely having somebody as a partner in this endeavor, somebody who, you know, cares about it as much as you do, you know, and you know, is motivated to like do the work, you know. It's pretty amazing. It's the first time I've really had that consistently, and yeah, it's empowering, you know, just like any collaboration is.
Wow.
It's really no different than like cross-racial conversations actually, you know, like it's empowering. You feel like you can feel yourself growing. You can literally feel yourself becoming a more whole human, you know, someone who's learning more about the human experience. Even though you didn't directly experience it, you know that, you know, like as a human being, you can relate to it. And so it's just such a beautiful thing, you know, and I think that we've got to expand that to more people. And so these live events, like the coffee shop ones that I'm creating, I want to start small. These are just going to be small, but like I'm going to expand as large as I can. And I want businesses to get involved. I want schools to get involved. I want churches to get involved. I want them to give us a chance to enter their venues and bring the community together. Give us an opportunity to try, you know, through the fears that you may feel. We can make this happen, and we can create something beautiful. Here we go. So one of my mutuals wrote a tweet out here, and they said, the number of folks out there who just resent the idea of multiracial democracies is stunning. That's the tweet.
Yeah.
But I replied, it makes so much sense given the history of racialization. At some point, we have to accept reality and stop being stunned. We've had generations of practice. It's time now. It is the time for us to stop being shocked, stop being like, oh my God, racism, who would have thunk it? Like, it is a part of the fabric of our society and like our existence. We need to now get past the point of identifying that that is the reality and start dealing with it, because we now finally have the power to deal with it. And we need to wake people up to the reality that we now have the power to deal with it. And that is kind of the next stage of being woke, if you will, is getting people to understand that they have their own power, that they can activate.
Yeah. And we also have different uses of technology because we have different ways of communicating with each other too, which is different. Because
I mean, that's the key.
We didn't used to have that. I mean, we had like demonstrations, like 250,000 people. I don't know how they did it without the internet, but I guess they did. And now, we have amazing capabilities. So do the races too, but we know how to use them.
Yeah, but we outnumber them. We honestly do. We
do.
Extensively, actually. And so it's not a problem of numbers. It's a problem. I mean, it is and it isn't. It's not a problem of numbers in that we need to outnumber them. We just need a critical mass of people who are willing to fight back. We need a critical mass of people who are willing to fight back. And fighting back, I'm talking about just engaging with people in the conversation about race. That's the beginning of fighting back. Believe it or not, that is the start of it. Yeah. I know you know. Like, I mean, me and you know, but like a lot of people out there, they're clueless about it. They don't think that there's an obligation to talk about it. I literally talked to someone on the show. I had one of my pre-interview conferences recently with a recent guest, and one of the early things he said during our conversation was, I just want to say, like, I don't think there's a moral obligation for me to talk about it. And I was just like, that's like a weird way to like start, to like, like.
Why does he want to be? Then why did he want to be on the show?
Well, it was his choice, right? So he was saying like, this is my choice to do it, but I want to make it clear that I don't think there's some kind of moral obligation to do it.
Well, that's good though. Because I'd rather have somebody say it's my choice, because sometimes people think, well, I have a moral obligation to do something, but I'm not really going to do anything anyway. But when somebody says, yeah, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, I appreciated him saying that, but like, it's just interesting because forget about morality for a second and just think about this. Let's go back to everyone's favorite thing, logic, right? Like, what kind of world do you want to live in? What kind of country do you want to live in? What kind of neighborhood do you want to live in?
Exactly. That's exactly my philosophy too. I want to create the world in which I want to live. You know how people go, oh, here's what I'm so sick of this. They leave on their voicemail, be the change you want to see in the world. I'm thinking, so what the F are you doing besides saying it? But
well, it's a huge sacrifice, Simma.
You are doing something. What?
I said it's a huge sacrifice, to decide to do something in this particular context, like
But we're doing it. We are doing it.
We are, yeah. But like you
could say, well, people go, be the change you want to see in the world. Okay, so what are you doing? Well, I'm saying it out loud. Okay, how have you changed? Oh, I don't know. I don't have responsibility. I have responsibility to say it, but we are doing it, and that's the thing, that if we want to see change, we have to be part of that change and actually do it. And we're reaching people by our shows.
And people, and even we're talking to I'm sure these
live event and live events that some of us are able to do.
You'll get there, okay? And you're going to join me for one of them. I'm going to bring you out here.